This program is brought to you by the partners of A Rood Awakening International. Help others find truth. Support A Rood Awakening International today.
What if you're in need? If your situation is less than ideal, are you still willing to do what YeHoVaH asks of you? Tonight, we're going to have a refreshing and honest conversation about what it means to be an obedient servant of the Almighty. Because it's the end of the sixth day, the sun is set, and this is Shabbat Night Live. Well, Shabbat Shalom, Torah fans. Welcome to Shabbat Night Live with Michael Rood. So, why do you do what you do? Have you ever stopped to examine the reasons why we do what we do with the talents that we've been given? Are we doing what the Almighty intends with those talents? Or are we doing what is most beneficial for our own desires? A challenging special episode is coming up in just a few minutes called, What's Your Motivation? And hey, guess what? Hanukkah starts Sunday night. We see that on the astronomically and agriculturally corrected biblical Hebrew calendar. You'll see it on your screen there, and you'll see that Hanukkah begins on Saturday night on the calendar, but because of the new moon that was not seen at the beginning of this month, Hanukkah now begins on Sunday night. We move it up one day. So that may seem like a small detail, but it's about getting things right, and that's what this ministry is all about, restoring the first century roots of the Christian faith. And because if you don't have a firm foundation and the proper motivation for doing things right, you're not going to do it right at all. So let's talk about that with the founder of A Rood Awakening International, Michael Rood. Welcome, Michael.
Well, thank you, Scott. It's great to be with you.
Speaking of doing things right, we just finished up a series last week with Miles Jones and yourself about the survival of the Hebrew Gospels, and we found out that the Gospels always were in Hebrew. They were kept alive by a remnant of Messianic folks, for lack of a better term.
And then sometimes the rabbinic folks got involved with it.
Exactly.
As well. We found some manuscripts in the archives of Jewish scribes, and now we have 28 of those in Hebrew.
Amazing how, knowledge will increase, as the Bible tells us, and now because of the internet and technology, all these things are coming out of the woodwork in the last couple of years. It's wonderful to see. And in fact, this has inspired you to do a new series you wanted to talk about.
That's right.
Here.
There's been such a tremendous support on this that I decided what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a series on the 4 verses that have been either added or so seriously mistranslated that they have destroyed any possibility of understanding the gospel chronology. And if you don't have chronology right, you don't have cause and effect, you don't really understand what is going on. We end up just isolating verses, numbered sound bites, and interpreting them to, well, what this verse means to me. Frankly, I don't care what it means to anybody else. I want to know what it meant to those to whom it was originally addressed, and so I'm going to cover those verses.
A lot of people say, well, the chronology of the Bible, why does it matter? Well, it matters because if you just have a Christian understanding that's been taught in church, you don't understand who the Messiah really was, because he fulfilled all these things, and unless you have it in the right chronology, that doesn't line up.
That's right. The Torah is our schoolmaster to lead us to the Messiah, and so few people even understand that the Gospels are based on Yeshua fulfilling the Torah, that every male Israelite is required to go up to the feast of the Lord 3 times a year. And so that is how the Gospels are structured.
Now, I know, thanks to your research, John 6:4, and when Nehemiah and John came out at Passover, we talked a lot about this. John 6:4 is the obvious insertion into most Bibles, but there's 3 others?
Well, it took me 20 years to find the answer to John 6:4. Nehemiah and John really uncovered this a lot more, but there are others that I found earlier than that.
I did not realize that. Okay,
so we're in for a real treat. People love this. I teach it live a lot. When I get invited places, I go and teach this, and so people that have been in the Christian church, when they read these things, it's like the lights come on. They get so excited about this because it makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's what we want. We want the scriptures to make sense. We just don't take it by faith and then do what Yeshua said, don't think, wait, he said, don't. No, he added more onto that. Don't think that I've come to destroy the Torah and the prophets. Most Christians, they just end up going, sitting in Bible school or Sunday school class and not thinking. Well, that's not what we do. The deeper we look into the scripture, the more diligently we study to show ourselves approved, that's when some of these things come out and they say, wait, this doesn't make sense in this language. And we found in our translations effort on the chronological gospels that a lot of times the Spanish will have it right, but the English didn't. Or the Chinese will have it right, but the Spanish didn't, and the English didn't. And so we go back to the original source, and that is where we find such incredible treasures.
Now, speaking of getting it right in Spanish, we've got it right in Spanish for the love gift. This is something brand new that we're doing. This is the love gift that we normally have for December. We've talked about it the last couple of weeks. You can see it at monthlylovegift.com. And also, we now have the teaching in Spanish.
That's right. Now, we have been working for years to get our materials into Spanish. That's why when I go into Spanish-speaking countries, people immediately recognize me in the airports, and they say, un rudo, and thinking that I speak Spanish, but no, it's Alvaro Martinez that is actually, I'm just like the hand puppet. My beard shakes and out comes Spanish, but these messages are so important, and so that is why the love gift we are now doing in Spanish, and we really need the support of the Spanish world to stand with us on this, because we have been putting it out for years at great expense, and so this is Disturbio in Efeso.
I love that, Disturbio in Efeso. It almost sounds Italian.
Well, we probably had the wrong accento on the wrong syllable, but you know, these are absolute treasures, and we want to give people the background. This is in the book of Acts and is essential to understand this event. The great, what do we say? The great trouble in Ephesus, or the Disturbio in Efeso.
And this is where Paul came up against worshipers of, was it Diana?
Diana of the Ephesians, which is their version of Easter, the bare-breasted goddess of fertility. And I see that they decided to take out some portion of the statue here in our representation of it because of the goddess of fertility and what she represents and what the original statue was really saying.
Yes, and that is a great teaching you have here, and it's all about coming up against adversity, and you actually bring it to the modern day as well to help people understand, keep going, don't give up.
Absolutely.
All right, great. Thank you for joining us today, Michael. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Scott.
All right, coming up, what's your motivation for what you do for the Almighty? Are you doing what the Almighty intends with the gifts He's given you, or are you using those talents to benefit yourself? A challenging discussion is coming up called What's Your Motivation? It's coming up next. And before that, we're going to bring in the Sabbath with Michael Rood. So get your bread and wine and follow along with Michael for the Kiddush. That's coming up next.
Clashing head-on with worshipers of the moon goddess Diana and with those who made their living selling likenesses of her, Paul is surrounded in Ephesus by a rioting mob, bent on protecting their pagan traditions and their livelihoods from the truth of the gospel. Our world today is no different.
And this is exactly what Paul is teaching. He's teaching the Gentiles to not forsake Moses, but forsake all of their paganism and come back to the truth. That is Israel's job. That has been Israel's job from the very beginning.
Trouble in Ephesus by Michael Rood offers a sobering parallel to modern times. Learn how we can use Paul's example to expose the distorted rituals of modern Christianity that distract from the prophecy-fulfilling truth of Yeshua's birth, death, and resurrection. You won't see this teaching anywhere else, and it's not for sale, but you can get it as a thank you from Michael Rood for your love gift donation of $50. Donate $100 or more, and you'll also receive this beautiful box of God's promises. Over 100 of the Bible's most encouraging promises, kept in a beautiful glass case, featuring a scene from the Jaffa Gate in Jerusalem. Or for a gift of $300 or more, you'll receive the teaching, the glass box of promises, and this solid wood and silver-plated challah bread cutting board. This exquisite showpiece features beautiful silver-plated artwork and even includes an engraved bread knife. Get this collection now, available in December only. It's a thank you gift from Michael Rood in appreciation of your support of Rood Awakening International. You'll get the Trouble in Ephesus teaching for a love gift donation of $50, the teaching and the glass box of promises for a gift of $100 or more. Or get everything plus the solid wood and silver-plated breadboard for a love gift donation of $300 or more. Get these gifts now while supplies last. Donate by phone at 800-788-7887 or visit monthlylovegift.com.
See it now at A Rood Awakening International. The Temple Treasures exhibit. Remarkably accurate, full-scale replicas of the most precious furnishings in the tabernacle and the Second Temple. The Torah, the menorah, the table of showbread, and the altar of incense. Plus, the world's only accurate-sized model of Ron Wyatt's eyewitness account of the Ark of the Covenant. The Temple Treasures exhibit. Book your tour now at templetreasuresexhibit.com.
The Chronological Gospels Bible is changing lives all over the world, putting everything the Messiah did in exact chronological order and explaining the behind-the-scenes truth of what the Messiah did, when he did it, and why. The timing of it all means everything. And now, the Chronological Gospels can be easier on your eyes. The larger print edition features 40% larger type, and every page appears exactly the same as the original, so you can follow along with others who have the regular size version. The Chronological Gospels larger print edition also has wider margins to write notes, and the premium quality paper means you can highlight without soaking through. Plus, the larger print edition lies flat, so you can teach without having to hold the book open. The Chronological Gospels larger print edition is a big and beautiful coffee table book, measuring a full 12 inches tall and 9 inches wide. Study the Bible with clarity and ease.
I love the size of this book. This is 9 by 12. The paper is perfect because it doesn't bleed through when I write on it. I can mark it up, and I always make notes in all my Bibles. Everything is the same place as it is on the smaller version, and I can just stand back and I can teach from it, and it's the perfect size. I pray thee, of whom speaks this prophet?
Order the Chronological Gospels larger print edition by phone or online. You'll get 40% larger type than the original. Call 800-788-7887. That's 800-788-7887. Or get the Chronological Gospels Bible larger print edition online at aroodawakening.tv/large.
The traditions of modern Judaism remind us of what we did during the temple period. Not what we did, but they remind us of what we did. But the followers of Yeshua also have some other traditions, some other things that are reminders of what has been accomplished for us. They are reminders of what goes back long before the temple period, and it reminds us of what happened the very year that Yeshua was crucified and resurrected. At the Last Supper that Yeshua had with his disciples, the Greek scriptures tell us that he took our tone. He took leavened bread and broke it. Of course, the English, the Greek, and all scriptures tell us that this Last Supper was before the Feast of Passover, and the following morning, the Pharisees refused to go into Pilate's judgment hall because they didn't want to be defiled so that they could eat the Passover. This is not the Passover meal, and every time we serve bread and wine gives us the opportunity, as Yeshua says, as often as you do this in remembrance of me. And so, as Yeshua said, this represents my body, which will be broken for you. This represents my shed blood. And he spoke the prayer that the Melech Tzedek shared with Abraham thousands of years ago. Baruch atah YeHoVaH Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pri hagafen. Blessed are you, YeHoVaH, our Elohim, King of the universe, creator of the fruit of the vine. And Yeshua took bread, and he blessed the Most High, saying, Baruch atah YeHoVaH Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Blessed are you, YeHoVaH, our Elohim, King of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth. As often as you do this, we do this in remembrance of him. L'chaim.
When you first encounter the saving power of Yeshua Messiah, you want to find a place that you can glean from, get ideas from, and just learn more about the Almighty who saved you. But sometimes when you encounter a group of folks, you find that maybe what is being preached to those folks is not everything you thought the Bible was all about. But we have to be careful that when we decide to maybe leave such a place, we don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. There are certain concepts we need to hold on to that are indeed truth, despite what you may think about such things from what you've heard on the pulpit. And today we want to explore such things with the Director of Ministry Development for Rood Awakening International. Please welcome David Robinson.
Good to be here, Scott.
David, we want to talk about all kinds of things today as relate to faith and finances, and also what is true, what's not true, and just how these things affect our faith and how we respond in faith to what the Almighty wants us to do. And today we have a special guest with us that can help us explore such things.
Yes, so we have syndicated talk show host and entrepreneur and best-selling author, and my dear friend Josh Tolley. Good to have you with us, buddy.
Oh, it's great to be with you this evening, gentlemen. How are you doing?
Doing great.
Excellent.
Great. We have a lot of topics we want to talk to you about today when it comes to finances, tithing, offering. There's so many different views. As we've moved away from the church, we've come into our Hebraic roots movement, or Messianic, whatever you want to call yourself. We have a lot of people saying, hey, there's not a need to tithe anymore. And so this has just opened up a lot of questions for, a lot of people. And we want to hear what you as an expert has to say about that.
Sure. So it's an interesting topic because you're right. As people move churches or move theologically in their position regarding what the Bible says, one of the things that seems to always be a hot button is tithing, giving, and offering. And it's amazing how that's the one that seems to be the hot button for everybody.
Right.
You either don't do it or do it. There's no gray matter. Just stop. So it's interesting when we look at this, we have to remember most people who come to a more Torah observant faith are coming out of the church saying, hey, the church, they weren't doing everything quite right. Interestingly enough, when they leave that and go back to the Torah, they forget that the one thing that the modern church keeps a hold of is the tithe. And where did the modern church get it? For some reason, that was the odd Old Testament part that the modern church wanted to bring forward. So I find it kind of odd that we leave the Christianity sort of Americanized version of it, go back to a Torah observant version, and in the process give up the only thing that was Torah in the Christianity version.
Right.
But beyond that, we have to realize there's a lot of opinions on this issue, but at the end of the day, it comes down to, is giving and tithing and providing for, has that gone away? Well, look around you. Is the world a better place or is it a worse place? And if it's a worse place, and if people are in need, and if there's people who are hungry, and there's people who don't know the message, and if there's people who need a coat, then there's obviously a need to give. So what you're really saying when you have an opinion like that is you're saying, hey, you know what? I really don't want to give, so I'm going to find some verse, try to take it out of context to make it sound all right so I can hold on to my money. And then when somebody says something about it, I'll point to the Bible and say, you can't question me because the Bible says X, Y, Z.
Right. And Jesus and Yeshua in Luke 6:38, he tells us to give. I talk to Messianics or people in Hebrew roots that say, there's not a New Testament model, and we only gave for the Levitical priesthood, and there were certain taxes that were for the theocratic society of Israel. But Yeshua clearly states that we are to give. Give, and it shall be given unto you.
Well, that's the part that really kind of just baffles me. We are saying, well, I'm not going to give because I don't live in the type of world that I've seen in the Bible. Well, if that's the case, you shouldn't get married, you shouldn't eat, you shouldn't drive a car, you shouldn't, just shut up. So you can't say, well, I don't wear sandals, so why do I matter if he says dust off your sandals and go down the road? Well, that doesn't apply to you either then, genius.
Right.
So you have to kind of adapt this to where you live now. And if Jesus wanted to provide for the poor, then you should want to provide for the poor. If Jesus says, what good is it to say bless you and send a brother out into the cold without a coat, you should be thinking, that's still a model of giving. if Jesus saw hungry people while he's preaching and said, they're hungry, maybe I should get some fish and some bread and feed them. If Jesus says, hey, wait a second, they're crippled, so I want to give a healing to them. I mean, to say that we don't see a New Testament version of giving, the entire New Testament is giving.
Right.
Paul sacrificing time away from where he wanted to be to go preach the message was giving. And then he says, okay, y'all, I got to go because I got to get back in time for the feast days. But even that is a form of giving. Every chapter of the book has a form of giving. Right. So to say, well, giving's not in the New Testament, you are not reading the New Testament.
Exactly. And I had an individual the other day say to me that, well, I don't have crops, and so therefore, and again, going on the model of the Torah, that I'm not having to give a tenth. I'm not supposed to give, and my argument is, we get our crop money every week or every 2 weeks or whenever you get paid from your job. I have a friend who's a farmer in the Midwest, and he plants and he waits until the end of the season for harvest, and then he gives his money to the work of the Lord. So, we are planting, whether we realize it or not. We get that money, and we are getting money for our crop. What is our crop? Our work that we are giving to our employers or so forth. But that money, we're still to give to that money for the spreading of the kingdom, to help the orphans, the widows. And God gave me a really cool way to look at this. We have spiritual orphans and widows in the spiritual, speaking spiritually, because most of the people that follow our ministry, us being Messianic Hebrew roots, they have come out of the church and have been lied to for 1,800 years. Okay, that's fine. So there's no leadership over them. So in a sense, in the spiritual realm, they're widows and orphans. What are we doing? What do we try to do here is by spreading the word, by the money that we receive from the crops, if you will, is to take care of widows and orphans and leading them spiritually and giving them good sound doctrine, good teaching.
Well, and let's just take that a step further. Let's say that you could make a case that said the agricultural tithe that people always love to refer to was just for the Levitical priesthood. And we don't have a Levitical priesthood, and you're not growing crops. Okay, irrelevant. What are you going to do with everything else in the Bible that tells you to give?
Yeah, right.
They're so focused on that one model that says, well, that doesn't apply to me. Then yet they say they're a Torah follower. Let's just reverse it. Take tithing out, because sometimes you have to get away from a money issue in order to see the money issue. If somebody were to say, oh, well, the Old Testament doesn't apply to me because we're no longer living in the land.
Right.
Well, do we not keep Passover then? Do we murder then? Do we commit adultery then? Well, no, that still applies. Well, then, genius, so does everything else. You might be able to say, giving to a Levite, okay, but you don't have one to give to anyway, so shut up.
Yeah.
What you have to go back to is and say, hey, okay, from Genesis to Revelation, we see giving as a good thing. The atheists see giving as a good thing. When you say, I don't want to give, you're actually worse off than the atheists, because at least they're saying everybody should give to everybody else. You're actually worse than Bernie Sanders,
right,
who says, hey, I'm going to take it and give, but somebody still has to give. When we say these things, we're forgetting the examples that we see, including in the Torah. Tithe was not invented with the agricultural giving to the Levites. The tithe was invented when Abraham won and gave a tenth to Melchizedek. And a bunch of people in the Messianic movement want to say, hey, we're now under the Melchizedek priesthood. Well, then, genius, you should be giving more than the whole agriculture to Levite thing, because now that's a higher priesthood, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So now we have to go back to the Torah and say, wow, that was a tenth of everything he got when he plundered and won against those other kings.
Right. That's very good. And I can say for myself, one of the greatest lessons I have learned in my walk with our Father is giving, and in that trust factor in the building of my faith by giving. And I was sharing with you a story that we were just talking before we went on air, that one thing I wanted before I went into the music business a few years back was I wanted a really nice guitar. I wanted like a Loudon or a customized guitar, a $3,000 guitar. And so When I went into the music business, all the funds were better, so I was able to buy one. And I went to this store and ended up getting a guitar. It was a lot cheaper than I actually wanted, a more expensive guitar, but this one sounded better than the more expensive guitars. Well, when I came home, I had a phone call from one of my relatives here, and a friend of mine's child had been born and had all sorts of issues, medical issues. And so she wanted me to find something to sign and have artists sign it and then send it so they could auction it. Well, I just received this guitar, just got this guitar. It was kind of my thing right now, my passion. And the Lord told me, the Father told me to give this to that auction. So I went to my wife and said, you're not gonna believe this, but I think I'm hearing correctly from the Lord, but He wants me to give away this guitar for this family. And she looked right at me and she goes, if the Father's telling you to do that, if YeHoVaH is telling you to do that, then do it. So I went to work, I got some people to sign it, and I packed it up and sent it off. I got the owner of the studio's wife to sign it, who's an artist, and went in the studio and asked if she could sign it, and she signed it, and we sent it off. Well, it didn't auction off. They put $500 on it or something, and nobody got it, so they gave it to the family and said, look, we'll auction it off later. Well, later that was about a week later, I went into the studio again to talk to the studio owner about some financial things. And he asked me, he goes, oh, by the way, where'd you get that guitar that you auctioned off? And I go, and I didn't want to toot my own horn. And we have a $4 million guitar vault there at the studio. And I go, well, and he goes, where did you get, I go, it wasn't your guitar. It wasn't your guitar, it was my guitar. And he looked at me and he goes, I'll tell you what, go to the accountant right now and have her cut. How much were they asking for? I go, they were starting to bid out at $500. He goes, go to the accountant, get a check made out to your friends for $1,000 and have them send your guitar back to you. If it was worth you giving your guitar away, I will double what they were going to get for it. So it was a great lesson I learned, that I gave something away, trusting that I was hearing correctly, being obedient to the Father, and gave, and it was given back to me. The whole principle of Luke 6:38.
Oh, absolutely. And there are so many stories like that, David. I know a pastor friend of mine who was getting their tax return back. Him and his wife also had jobs outside the ministry, and he wanted a motorcycle. Always had, middle-aged time, and he's thinking, okay, I'm going to get my tax return back, and I'm going to buy just like a little Honda Shadow or something. And then YeHoVaH tells him, no, you need to give this back. Just give it all. Just donate your entire tax return. He's like, oh, okay, fine. Then he's preaching this message about, 4 or 5 weeks later. Motorcycle is out of his mind already. And he's preaching that message, if you have 2 coats, right, then give one to your brother. Mm-hmm. And this guy, now he didn't tell anybody he wanted a motorcycle. This guy comes up and says, Pastor, do you know anybody who wants a motorcycle? And he says, what, are you kidding me? He goes, well, I heard your message about if you have 2 coats. I have 2 motorcycles. And it was a Harley Davidson that was way beyond the value of what the Honda Shadow was going to be. I mean, there's so many things like this. But what's really interesting, when people say, well, I don't want to give, Eli is the sound guy I have in the studio. Can I borrow your hat for a second, Eli? I don't want to give. I don't want to give anything to support anything. Eli and I happen to be fans of the St. Louis Blues. When you buy a hat, you are giving to the team. You are now telling the world, this is the organization you support. Why would we not want to do that the other direction?
Right.
Why would we not say, oh, give $10? Oh, the Bible says I don't have to.
Right.
The Bible says you don't have to do a lot of things. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do a lot of things. The Bible commands husbands to love your wives. It doesn't command wives to love their husbands. Does your wife love you? I hope so. So we got to get off of this trip that just because it's money, somehow it has a different set of just common sense application.
Right. And the problem is, and I think you would agree, is the model that is set by our culture and by the prosperity gospels that are out there have tainted everything for us. I mean, even for the ministries that are working on, shoestring budgets, or, where people are doing 3 and 4 jobs because they're sold out to the message, but we have these prosperity gospels out there that are, you know, ruining it for everyone that's really doing the work of the Lord.
I absolutely agree. I think Christianity today has been dominated by two messages. Prosperity gospel on one side, you know, buy my $900 handkerchief, spin around, become a millionaire. Then on the other side, you have poverty gospel, where money's not important, money's borderline evil. Don't worry about money, just it's terrible, but give 10% maybe on your way out. And gone is the gospel. See, you can't tell me that God cares about everything, right? Because the Bible's for all instruction. So he cares about everything except for what you do with the money that you've been working 40, 50, 60 hours a week earning. Mm-hmm. What do you think he wants? So I would actually tell viewers, let's just take a step back. Let's say, for example, you're right. There's no such things as tithes and offerings and gifts anymore. Just take a step back. What do you think God would want you to do with that money? Do you think he would want you to spend it on drugs and hookers? No. Do you think he would want you to waste it on fruitless things? No. What do you think he would want you to do with it? Just honestly ask yourself. And you're going to see, well, he would probably want me to, well, support my family, support people who are his people. Oh, dang it, that's giving. Support messengers that have his message. Dang it, that's giving. And then that little devil inside will stand up and say, well, the message of the God is supposed to be free. Yep, that's not what we're talking about, genius. But even with that, he says the one who sends the prophet gets the same reward as the prophet who went.
Right.
So there's an element to that. There's a reason why God talks more about money in the Bible than he does heaven. And when we get silly and selfish, because not giving is what? Selfish. Mm-hmm. So when we get selfish and say, hey, you know what? I don't have to give. I don't want to give. Then what's God going to say to you?
Exactly.
And what's funny is all these believers say, well, God knows what's in my heart. Okay, well, then what's God going to give to you? So there's an element of we just have to kind of grow up and mature. If this was outside the context of religion, you wouldn't let your kids act this way. You wouldn't let your kids go to school and see a homeless kid and not give him something and say, well, the school doesn't require you to give. Grow up. Is there somebody doing something that you like, support, have belief in, and you want to help them? Then give. Period.
In fact, there's a New Testament principle there as well that we miss sometimes, where, and sometimes we hear half the message, not the whole thing, and half the message is you do not have because you do not ask.
Right.
But the other half of that verse is when you get it, you're also not getting because when you get it, you're keeping it for yourself.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, he'll give you the desire of your heart. Well, guess what? If you're pursuing Yahweh, YeHoVaH, the desire of your heart will change to his desires. And so you won't want to keep that money. You would want to use it.
That is to share it and to spread good news and all the rest of it. Yeah, exactly. And Josh, I think something people often forget about also in the New Testament is when Yeshua said, you know, you will not always have me, but you will always have the poor. And I've often thought about that. Well, why would Yeshua always want us to have the poor? And I think it's to continue this spirit of giving so that we always remember that he is our provision and we are to be that provision for others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, notice how he didn't end that with, you're always going to have the poor, so make sure you keep all your money to yourself and keep it away from those greedy, selfish poor people.
Right.
No, he didn't say that. He said you're going to have the poor, so make sure you're giving to them. I mean, it's just foolish to think. Really, it is foolish to think that the God who gave so much to us and taught us to give so much back, all of a sudden changed his mind and said, you know what, stop giving. It's just, I want you to keep all of it.
Yep.
That's just a selfish, foolish, self-centered opinion that we have to abandon.
The whole model of his ministry was what? Giving, teaching us to give. Even the disciples, when they fed the 4,000, they were hungry, right?
Right.
They were hungry, but yet they fed and served first. It's all about giving.
And what did he say? They said, oh, we only have so many fish and so many loaves. And he said, well, you feed them.
Yep.
So Yeshua actually didn't feed the 5,000 or the 4,000 for that matter. He said, you feed them.
That's
and
right.
You do it.
serve.
So, exactly. So you serve. And then that'll bring us to our next topic, which is, what is your motivation? We're going to talk about that in the next section. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes. And welcome back. Something I've had to check myself on in the past is, what's my motivation for giving? You know, if we have a surplus, it's easy to give from that surplus. But if we have a lack, that's where the test comes.
Yeah.
You know, a lack, whether you lose a job or you get demoted or something like that, or even what's happened recently with the tax laws changing.
Yeah.
Well, maybe the tax laws make it not so advantageous for you tax time to be giving. So is that your reason for giving? Or do you hold on to money because you hear the scary word recession coming? So I think that's something we need to evaluate in our minds. Are we giving from a spiritual perspective, or are we giving because of what we see in the natural world?
Yeah, and one thing that I've learned is where my faith has grown the most, just like the story of the guitar, is I didn't have one. I gave the only one I had. So I gave out of my need instead of out of my surplus. And that's the motivation of the heart that God wants to see from us. He doesn't want to wait until we have plenty to give. He wants us to give along the way. And it doesn't take much, to do that. But it's the attitude of the heart, and that's what matters most.
Well, and I think too, guys, one thing we have to remember, our motivation is directly correlated to how we see ourselves as a child of God. Mm-hmm. If we truly see ourselves as a child of God, giving is no longer really even up to you. If you see yourself as a child of God, God says He will provide for all your needs, that you're not supposed to worry about tomorrow, that there is going to be provision for you. So as you're walking along as an ambassador of Him, you have to think to yourself, I'm in the world, not of it. Since I'm just an ambassador essentially from His kingdom into this world, what would my Father do if He were here? So now you get yourself out of the way. You say, okay, I'm seeing a ministry in need. I'm seeing a hospital in need. I'm seeing a widow in need. Would God give to these people? If the answer is yes, then maybe that's a yes for you. And maybe that's the reason why those people, those ministries, those organizations were brought into your path. I mean, there's an element of, was this an accident? And what happens is, when we have a selfish intent, and I'm not trying to say, every poor person needs to tithe their way out of poverty. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying, though, is when we have a selfish intent and say, well, I don't have enough to give. Really? They did this like social experiment where they gave people free pizza. And the people who they gave it to first were well-off Americans. Those well-off Americans didn't share. Then they gave homeless people pizzas. And they had other people say, I'm really hungry. Not one homeless person didn't give the pizza.
Right.
Because they understood, wow, I don't have. I know what it's like not to have. Now that I have a little, I don't want you to feel that pain either. Have some of my pizza. That right there should be a light bulb. Forget your interpretation of, well, what's a Levite? Shut up.
Yeah.
If really, and I'm being serious, and I can say this because I don't have a ministry. When I have somebody come up to me and say, well, a Levite doesn't exist, you greedy, selfish, heartless pig. Why are you giving based on the excuse you can make? I don't care if there was no Bible. You lived pre-Torah. Is it not a godly thing to help somebody else? So to me, you really have to do a gut check on your motivation. Yeah. And really not your motivation for giving, but your motivation for not giving.
Right.
Indeed.
Why are you not giving?
David, like you relayed the story of your guitar, there's a story like that for myself as well, where exactly, Josh, what you're talking about, your motivation for giving and know what it's like to have lack. I came here from Canada and I was living on visas, from one visa to the next. And between two visas, there was a little glitch in the understanding of when one started and one ended. And I had in there 9 weeks that I was not allowed to be paid by anybody. I had to, if I was going to come to work, I had to volunteer my time. So I couldn't get paid for those 9 weeks. Now, God miraculously provided, and that's a whole other story. But once I knew what it was like, wow, I'm really going to have to wonder, where am I going to get groceries from? Can I really fill my tank with gas? Mm-hmm. And so now, every time I come up against, with those folks who, stand at a stoplight with a cardboard sign in their hands, saying, will you give anything? People say, oh, don't give to those guys. They're just going to buy drugs and alcohol with it. That's not my business.
That's not your responsibility.
That's not my responsibility. My responsibility is to give to them. I know what it's like to have nothing and how scary that is. Yeah. And so I always made it a point to, if I have some extra bills lying around, of course, these guys can't accept credit cards, right? So you have to have some dollar bills kicking around. And so I keep them in my car now. I always have cash in my car just in case I see one of those guys, because I know exactly what it's like to have nothing and how scary that is.
That's right. And I have not ever, I mean, when I look at my life and whenever God is, when I have a bill to pay, but I see a need and I give to that need, I have not once has He not provided. In just miraculous ways, or somebody just coming up and kind of like your story, where God just sends somebody to give us money. I've had that as being a pastor. Somebody would come up and somebody said to give you this envelope. And
it will come from the weirdest places you never thought.
Yes.
I mean,
it's all about service again. It's all what is our walk with YeHoVaH supposed to teach us? To live selfless, to give to others. You hit it right on the head. Without the Bible, take everything out. Any good God or any God made in man's head or whatever would give, take care of, and so that's what our job is. Our job is to take care.
Beyond that, I mean, it's even in the Bible where He says, what evil person, bad person, whatever the translation, if a child asked for bread, would give him a stone.
Right.
So He's even saying, even the straight up evil guy is a giver.
Yeah.
So we have to get back to this place and then ask yourself, what if, just think of a time that something was given to you. Maybe somebody gave you a copy of this program. Maybe somebody gave you a copy of a Bible. What if they didn't? What if they had your attitude and said, you know what, I'm not giving? Then you wouldn't even be able to watch this right now. Right. Somebody gave to make this possible. So you have to go back again and say, well, what if it never happened to me? And what's really fascinating, I always found, because I had ups and downs. It's not like I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth. I even had a section of my life where I was homeless. But I always tried to tip waitresses really well. I tried to, whatever it was. There's just the little things that I could do. And I noticed that there was always God's provision. Mm-hmm. And there was this time when I just came out with Evangelpreneur. And we were trying to get it into churches and get pastors to read it. And I was at a Cracker Barrel of all places. And I feel this pull that God is telling me, buy this couple their dinner. And I'm by myself and I'm like, oh, certainly that's not God. And then I make a deal. If I can get the receipt before the waitress drops it off. Oh, wait, waitress dropped it off. Certainly not God. We're out in the lobby area and we're both in line to pay. And I feel as if He's almost pushing me to give this couple dinner. I'm not destitute. They're not destitute. We're both, fine. But I just feel this push to give. And sometimes if we question our motivation, we'll miss a blessing. So I say, ma'am, excuse me, I want to buy this couple their dinner. And they turn around like, you don't have to do that. I'm like, you know what? No big deal. Just take it. And he goes, if I can ever do anything for you. Nope, you can't do anything for me. Just take it. I don't want this to be happening anyway. Mm-hmm. And he goes, well, if there's anything I can do for you. My name is John Smith. I'm the pastor of First Baptist Church. And that is exactly the connection we needed to get the book Evangelpreneur into churches. So sometimes we think we know, well, God wants me to give or not to give for X, Y, Z. No, you could be giving because you don't even understand why yet. Yes. And you might not even understand while you're alive, which is why He says that way no man shall boast. Even with what the Scott, the example you gave, let's say you give $10 to a homeless person and they might buy drugs. You know what? That might have been the test that God sent them. God was going to send them the $10 and say, son, are you repentant yet? So we're even denying what God is doing when we decide to play God and say, oh, well, I'm not supposed to give.
Right. And that's why obedience is always better than sacrifice. Key. If you obey, right. All the rest falls into place. Otherwise, then it is a sacrifice. It's like we just have to obey, and that's the whole idea of this.
Well, and blessing comes with obedience.
Yes.
I can even think of times in my life where, I was almost sure I was hearing God telling me to do a certain thing, and I did it out of obedience, but He really wanted me to do this. But guess what happened? Here He blessed me until He got me here. So, he's going to bless your obedience. And, and it's funny you were telling that story. Just as a testimony to that, Sukkot, driving into town, we had helped somebody just a few weeks before that, and we were driving into town, and guess what? I lost my wallet, or couldn't find my wallet. And we'd already ordered food, and we were going through a drive-through, and I was going to pull up and say, I'm sorry, just cancel the order. We can't find my wallet. I pull up and the lady goes, the car in front of you paid for your meal.
Wow.
And was that a blessing because of something we did just immediately or right before that? No, it was a practice. It was seeing the need, and it was just such a testimony for us. It was like, man, isn't that awesome?
Think about that. Okay, so I have hundreds, if not thousands of stories like that. I do not have one story where somebody said, yeah, I was really selfish this one time. I saw this person, I saw this ministry, and I didn't give. Next thing you know, I won the lottery. Like there was never a selfish equals reward story. Yeah. But there's hundreds of stories like the one you just told. Hundreds of them. And all of us have one. All of us.
Right. And it doesn't always have to be money for money. David and I, you and I were talking about this before we turned the cameras on. It's that just because you give of finances doesn't mean you're going to get finances back. Right. That's a made up thing that we get preached at us, But it may provide the confidence you need to do something else. If you let go of something you're holding dear, your finances, right? You're able to do something else, or you get blessed in another way. And even we've talked about that blessing a ministry doesn't even have to be financial necessarily. Like, for example, we have a show every Friday night where we have it live online, and we have a chat room. Well, there's one guy moderating the chat room there. And yes, he has a salary from a Rood Awakening. But often there's a lot of chat going on there.
Oh yeah, it's more than he can keep up
Right,
with,
and so there's volunteers who jump in and answer really hard questions from the Bible that aren't necessarily easily answered. And by doing that, you're giving of your time. And because you give of your time, we don't have to hire another biblical expert to go in there and moderate the chat room.
That's right. That's very good. And being in ministry, being on the other side, Josh, it's like, okay, I can remember watching TV and seeing this guy get up on TV and cry out for money, and then I hear it again. And, it's just kind of, to be honest with you, it was a turnoff, and you just kind of get this mindset. Okay, we've had so many crooked church leaders that have just ripped people off. But one thing I am very thankful, and this is part of my growth, is being on the other side and being involved in ministry development and actually seeing the need that ministry has and understanding that there is a reason why we ask people to give. Look, I want you to give. I want you to pray about it, and I trust that God is going to tell you where to give, even if it's not to us, but give to the kingdom work. But understanding that has been a great eye-opener for me, the fact that we do need funds. We need funds to be able to put product out to teach, to sow seed, to broadcast, if you will. We have to buy fertilizer. We have to have seed to put in the ground, broadcast on this TV station. Well, that ground's not fertile. We have to go here and to spread the truth. It is a real need that we have.
And some people will say, well, television broadcasting the way you're doing it now and spreading the gospel, it was never meant to be that way. Think about it. Yeshua, okay, they had a CFO on their team. His name was Judas. He held the money. Why would they need somebody to hold the money? Because it got this entourage of 12 people plus the Messiah going from place to place to place. He's not going to, multiply money everywhere he goes. That's their broadcast. They were broadcasting from town to town to town, spreading the message, and they needed money to get to those different places.
That's right.
And even when challenged, let's go back to the feeding of the 5,000. When Yeshua challenged them being the disciples, to say, will you feed them? Immediately they thought of, we have to buy bread. Where are we going to get enough money? First of all, they were used to the fact that, we're going to have to buy. So they've obviously had to do this before for other smaller crowds. Well, buy meals or something to have them stick around. You have to come to that conclusion.
Well, and what's interesting is, if that's their conclusion and they're the disciples, do we know more than the disciples? And there's this element of, they just didn't understand what they were doing. You can never outgive God. And I agree, David, there's so much of this, hey, donate because we need another G5 jet and people are burned out. Absolutely, I totally understand it and I get it. But you have to go back to what I said a moment ago. What's your motivation for giving versus what's your motivation for not giving?
Right.
And most of the people who don't give are not even really not giving because some minister that they weren't going to give to anyway was going to buy a jet. A lot of it's, I don't want to lose what I have. I don't want to give of what I have. And we've become a very selfish society. We just have. We're cocooning where we don't interact with people. Attendance at weddings is down because we're selfish. I'm just going to stay at home, watch the pictures online. Attendance at funerals the same way. I'm not going to attend the funeral. That's a giving. I'm giving my time. No, instead, I'll just give a condolence message on Facebook. We are becoming selfish. And then you have to ask yourself in these end times, selfish with your time, selfish with your love, selfish with your affection. Even dinner table is the phone on the table. That's selfish because I don't want to care about you. I just want to keep caring about what I have. I don't want to give you my attention. And why do we think it's called give attention? Go ahead.
No, I think what you did is you just defined what biblical poverty is. That's biblical poverty. That's without. That's just you're just without. You have nothing. You have no relationship anymore. And all you care about is self. And it's that mentality. I think that gives it a new meaning.
Absolutely. And then we delude ourselves by saying, well, I can quote chapter and verse. So can the devil. So can the devil. Your ability to quote chapter and verse is 100% irrelevant if you're not loving, if you're not giving, if you're not helping. So, we can't say that the greatest form of love is to lay down your life for your brother. That's giving.
Right.
And I'm serious about this, and I'm not even trying to be funny. Today, we're seeing the opposite. We're seeing that hardening of the heart, where a man had a heart attack in line at McDonald's, and people stepped over him. Where right now at all these fast food restaurants, you're seeing fights in the drive-thru. And these are the same sort of people who are saying, well, I don't have to give because the Levites are... Shut up. Look around you. You need to give now more than ever. And it doesn't mean your last paycheck. That's not what it means. But be a giving person. Have a giving heart.
Yeah, to show love. Isn't that what it's all about?
Yeah,
1
love
John conquers
4.
all.
Well, 1 John 4, if you say you know God and you do not have love, you do not know God.
Right.
And what defines that? Go to 1 Corinthians, or is it 2 Corinthians 13, and it says God is love, God is patient. And look at each one of those things. Do you have those things? Are you showing those things? If you're not, you need to just rethink everything here because you're missing it. You're getting that selfish mentality that's just been substantiating itself in your life, in the foundation of your faith, and we have to get rid of that mindset.
And I think what Josh said, it was right on, hit the nail on the head.
Spot on.
Exactly. With social media especially, we're so self-absorbed in this little thing in our hands called a phone, and what are we saying on Instagram? What are we saying on Facebook? What are we saying on this? What are we saying on that? And it's so me, and you have 3 folks sitting on a couch. The minute I saw this, when we introduced these phones into our house, and we had 3 folks sitting on the couch, family members who are supposed to be talking to each other, all on their phones doing individual things, I said to myself, here we go. This is the beginning of the end of the family.
Yeah, it is. That's in the arch, the little tour thing you have down there. I actually still had the picture of a young child, the mom and the dad. They never said anything to each other, sitting down at a bench, all on their phones. All on their phones.
And to make it even worse, our likes and our comments have now become currency. So we won't give a thumbs up unless that person has thumbed up our stuff. We won't follow somebody else unless they followed us. Like, we are so stinking selfish. It's insane. So we have to start giving, and we have to, in order to save our souls in a sense. And I'm not trying to get all ethereal, but if your soul is of God and God is a giver, then yeah, we have to start realizing we have to be a giving people again.
Josh, David, I think we've made some good points here about giving. Yeah, and Josh, I want to thank you because speaking of giving,
absolutely,
you have given your time to be here today. There was not some massive amount of money paid for you to be on this program. You gave of your time and all your resources on your end to do this Skype call. We want to thank you so much for doing it. And we really appreciate your comments. Some really good stuff there. So again, if you have appreciated this program, thanks very much. We can't do it without you. Like David was talking about, the sowing and reaping. We need to to sow the seed out there to reap a harvest, but we have to put that seed out there. And if you're from an agricultural background like I am, there are things called crop inputs. You have to have the fertilizer. You have to have everything else that goes along with the seed to make it grow, to spread it to others, to feed others. And as David was talking earlier, to feed those spiritual orphans and widows who really need this message. You've already heard it. Help us spread it to others. Thank you very much.